Before the world heard Charles Spencer's most famous words, Diana heard them first. Not in a studio, not in a rehearsal room, not in front of cameras, but in the quiet beside his sister's coffin, before the funeral that would stop the world. He read the eulogy to her, line by line. A brother speaking to the sister he could no longer protect in life, making one final promise before 2 billion people would hear it the next day. That promise was simple in meaning, but enormous in weight. Diana would not belong only to the institution that had wounded her. Her sons would not be swallowed whole by the same cold machinery. And her memory would not be left unguarded. For nearly 3 decades, Charles Spencer has lived under that vow, quietly, carefully, without turning himself into a permanent royal commentator, without selling every private memory, without opening every family door. And that is why the latest argument around Diana, Harry, Meghan, Netflix, and the royal family feels so explosive. Because when people talk about Diana now, they usually talk about her as an image. The people's princess, the rebel royal, the wounded mother, the fashion icon, the woman who changed the monarchy. But Charles Spencer remembers something else. He remembers Diana before the world owned her, before the cameras, before the wedding, before the palace, before the tragedy. To him, Diana was not content. She was not a brand. She was not a weapon in someone else's public battle. She was his sister, and that is the line so many people in this story seem to forget. The question is not whether Harry has the right to love his mother. Of course he does. The question is not whether Meghan can admire Diana. Of course she can. The real question is much more dangerous. When does honoring Diana become using Diana? And who gets to decide where that line is? That question is why Charles Spencer matters, because he is not a palace official. He is not a Netflix executive. He is not a royal staffer. He is not part of the monarchy's daily machine. He stands in a stranger, more powerful place. He is Diana's blood. The keeper of Althorp. The man who buried her on Spencerland. The man who has watched, year after year, as the world kept returning to Diana's pain, because Diana's pain still sells. And if reports about a future Diana-related media project are true, then Harry and Meghan may have run into the one gate that no streaming deal can force open. The gate at Althorp. To understand why, you have to go back to the moment that changed everything. Not 2026. Not Netflix. Not Montecito. The Panorama interview. Diana's most famous television confession was once treated as the ultimate act of truth-telling. A princess sitting down, breaking silence, speaking about loneliness, betrayal, pressure, and the unbearable atmosphere inside royal life. For years, people saw that interview as Diana reclaiming her voice. But decades later, the story turned darker. An independent inquiry found that Martin Bashir used deceitful methods, including fake bank statements, to obtain the interview. The BBC later apologized, and Prince William said the interview should never be aired again because of the way it was obtained and the damage he believed it caused. That changed the meaning of everything, because suddenly, Diana's most powerful public confession was not just a confession. It was also evidence of exploitation. A vulnerable woman had been made to feel more isolated, more suspicious, more cornered. And Charles Spencer had been part of the road that led Bashir to Diana. Not knowingly, not maliciously, but close enough for the guilt to remain. That is the wound behind everything. When people wonder why Charles Spencer is so protective, this is the key. He has already seen what happens when Diana's private pain becomes television. He has already seen what happens when a media figure arrives promising truth, intimacy, and public understanding. He has already seen how easily a wounded woman can become the raw material for a ratings event. And once a person has lived with that kind of regret, they do not open the door again easily. That is why Althorp is not just a house. It is a boundary. Diana is buried there. Her childhood belongs there. Her family memory lives there. And Charles Spencer has treated that place not as a backdrop for endless content, but as a guarded space. The world has Diana's public image. The world has the wedding footage, The world has the revenge dress. The world has the interviews, photographs, headlines, documentaries, podcasts, books, and theories. But there is still a private Diana the world has not consumed. And Charles Spencer may be one of the last people standing between that private Diana and the marketplace. That is why this story hits so hard, because Harry and Meghan's whole public identity after leaving royal life has been built around a powerful emotional argument. They say they were trapped. They say the institution failed them. They say the press hunted them. They say history was repeating itself. And whether someone believes them completely or not, the emotional architecture is obvious. Diana is the shadow behind the whole story. Harry has often connected his own pain to the loss of his mother and the media culture around her death. Meghan has also been compared by supporters and critics to Diana because of her conflict with the royal system and her own public disclosures. Their 2022 Netflix series became one of Netflix's biggest documentary debuts, proving that the world still pays attention when the Sussex story touches the Diana wound. But success creates temptation, because once the audience responds to pain, the machine asks for more. More history, more emotion, more family conflict, more royal trauma, more Diana. That is where the moral problem begins. A son grieving his mother is human. A production company packaging that grief is business. Those two things can exist at the same time. And that is what makes the whole situation so complicated. Harry is not wrong to remember Diana. But Charles Spencer may also not be wrong to protect her. Both things can be true. And that is what most viral royal arguments refuse to admit. They demand a villain. They demand a hero. They demand a clean side. But Diana's story has never been clean. It has always been love, grief, image, control, media, money, class, family, and public hunger, all tangled together. Now add Meghan to that story. For supporters, Meghan is the outsider who entered the royal system and suffered under the same cold pattern that once damaged Diana. For critics, Meghan is someone who understood the power of Diana's symbolism and used it too carefully, too often, and too publicly for it to be accidental. That is why Diana's jewelry matters in the public imagination. The aquamarine ring, the butterfly earrings, the Cartier watch. Each appearance can be read two ways: a loving tribute, or a strategic echo. And the uncomfortable truth is that nobody can prove the private intention. Only Meghan knows what those choices meant to her. But audiences do not only read intention, they read pattern. And the pattern has been discussed because Diana is not ordinary family history. Diana is global emotional property. Every reference to her carries power. Every visual echo creates meaning. Every comparison becomes a headline. And Charles Spencer, watching from the place where Diana's actual body rests, may see those echoes very differently from fans online. Because to him, Diana is not an aesthetic. She is not a mood board. She is not a shortcut to sympathy. She is the girl from Althorp who became a princess and then never truly escaped the people who wanted pieces of her. That is why the Netflix question matters. In 2025, Harry and Meghan extended their Netflix relationship under a new multi-year first-look deal through Arcuel Productions. Reports have also claimed that a Diana-related documentary idea tied to the 30th anniversary of her death in 2027 has been discussed, though such reports should be treated as reports, not confirmed public fact from the family. But even the possibility is enough to raise the central question. Would Diana's 30th anniversary become a memorial or a media event? Would it be about Diana, or about who gets to inherit her story? Would it heal anything? Or would it reopen the wound because the wound is still commercially useful? That is where Charles Spencer's imagined refusal becomes so powerful in the public mind. Whether or not every reported detail is true, people believe he would say no because his past actions make that believable. He refused to let certain productions use Althorp. He has spoken about his concerns over dramatized royal storytelling being mistaken for fact. He has pushed for accountability over the Panorama interview. He has treated Diana's memory as something to defend, not something to rent out. So if a proposal ever came asking for Althorp, private family footage, diaries, or unseen material to serve a Sussex-centered Diana narrative, the answer would almost write itself. No. Not because Harry is not Diana's son, but because Diana's son is not the only person with a claim on Diana's dignity. That sentence is the heart of the story. Harry has grief. William has grief. Charles Spencer has grief. Diana's sisters have grief. Her friends have grief. The public has memory. But grief is not ownership. And the deepest family grief is often the grief that speaks least. That may be why William's position also matters here. Prince William has been forceful about the Panorama interview, saying it held no legitimacy and should never be aired again. His concern was not only about the interview itself, but about the way deceit shaped the circumstances around it. For William, Diana's image is not just his mother's image. It is part of the trauma of childhood. He was old enough to remember the chaos, old enough to understand the cameras, old enough to walk behind the coffin while the world watched. So when Diana becomes a media product again and again, it is not abstract to him. It is personal. Harry knows that pain too. That is what makes the brothers' divide so tragic. They are both Diana's sons. They both lost the same mother. But they seem to have drawn opposite lessons from the loss. Harry appears to believe that silence protects the wrong people. William appears to believe that silence sometimes protects the dead. Harry speaks because he believes the system must be exposed. William holds back because he knows exposure can become another kind of violation. And Charles Spencer stands closer to William on this one point. Diana was exploited once. Do not let it happen again. That does not make Harry evil. It does not make Meghan evil. But it does make the commercial machine around them dangerous. Because streaming platforms do not operate like families. They operate like businesses. They ask one question first. Will people watch? And with Diana, the answer is always yes. That is the tragedy. The public never stopped watching Diana. Not when she was alive, not when she was dying, not when she was buried, not when her sons grew up, not when her sons stopped speaking, and not now, when her memory is once again tied to money, media, and family war. The cruelest thing about Diana's legacy is that the thing she could never escape in life still follows her in death. The lens. Someone is always pointing a lens at Diana. Even when the lens is emotional, even when the lens is loving, even when the lens belongs to family. That is why Charles Spencer's role matters more than people realize. He is not just saying no to one project. He represents the idea that some things should remain unavailable. Not because they lack value, because they have too much value. A diary is not just paper. A home movie is not just footage. A childhood bedroom is not just a location. A burial island is not just scenery. These are not assets. They are remains of a person. And there is a difference between preserving remains and producing content from them. That difference is what this entire conflict is about. The Sussex argument, if we state it fairly, is this. Harry is Diana's son. He has a right to tell his own story. His life was shaped by her death. His fear for Meghan and his anger at the press are tied to what happened to his mother. If he wants to make a documentary about Diana's legacy, he has a personal claim no outsider can erase. That argument is not weak. It is deeply human. But the Spencer argument is also human. Diana was more than the role she plays in Harry's narrative. She was a sister, daughter, friend, mother to 2 sons, and a private woman whose pain has already been overexposed. If a project uses her as emotional fuel for another brand, then protection becomes necessary. That argument is not weak either. And that is why this story is so powerful. Because both sides can sound right until money enters the room. Money changes the temperature. A private tribute can be tender. A global streaming event is different. A son remembering his mother can move people. A platform marketing a mother's tragedy can feel cold. That is why viewers react so strongly to the idea of Diana being used as a bridge between Meghan's story and Diana's. Some people see the comparison as natural. A royal woman isolated. A woman under press attack. a woman speaking about mental health, a woman challenging the palace. But others see the comparison as forced. Diana was inside the system. Meghan left it. Diana was hunted by a tabloid age with fewer tools of self-production. Meghan and Harry built their own media company. Diana did not have a Netflix deal. That difference matters. It does not erase Meghan's pain. But it changes the frame. Pain told from inside a cage is one thing. Pain packaged after escape is another. That is why Diana remains so hard to invoke safely. Anyone who uses her story inherits not only her compassion, but the moral risk attached to her exploitation. Charles Spencer understands that better than almost anyone. He learned it through the worst possible lesson. A journalist came close. A sister trusted. A television event happened. The world watched. And decades later, the truth about how it was obtained left scars that still affect the royal story today. So now, when another media machine approaches Diana's memory, even with softer language, even with a son's grief attached, Spencer has reason to be cautious. Maybe more than cautious. Maybe immovable. And that may be what Harry never expected. Not that strangers would criticize him. He is used to that. Not that the palace would resist him. He expects that. But that Diana's own brother, the man who once attacked the coldness of the royal institution at Diana's funeral, might become the person standing in the way of Harry's Diana narrative. That is the twist. Charles Spencer once seemed like the anti-palace voice, the man who challenged the system, the man who spoke the words many people wanted to hear after Diana died. But now, in this new fight, he may be aligned not with the palace as an institution, but with William's instinct to protect Diana from another round of public consumption. That is not hypocrisy. It is evolution. In 1997, protecting Diana meant challenging the institution. In 2026, protecting Diana may mean challenging the content machine. The enemy changed. The duty did not. And that is the strongest line in the whole story. The duty did not change. Diana still needs protection because Diana still sells. Her name sells books. Her dresses sell exhibitions. Her interviews sell documentaries. Her pain sells sympathy. Her son's conflict sells clicks. Her memory still moves markets, audiences, newspapers, and platforms. And at some point, someone has to say, enough. Not every memory should be monetized. Not every wound should be reopened. Not every anniversary needs a production schedule. Not every private object needs to become a scene. That is the line Charles Spencer represents. Whether people agree with him or not, his position has moral force because it comes from sacrifice. He could have cashed in more than almost anyone. He had access nobody else had. He had stories nobody else could tell. He had locations nobody else could offer. He had the last name. He had the childhood archive. He had the resting place. He could have built an entire industry around being Diana's brother. Instead, he largely chose restraint. And in a world where everyone is selling access, restraint feels almost shocking. That is why this story matters beyond one documentary. It asks what family loyalty means in the age of streaming. It asks whether grief still belongs to the grieving, or whether fame turns grief into public property. It asks whether a son's pain gives him the right to use every part of his mother's story. It asks whether a brother's guilt gives him the right to lock the vault. And it asks whether Meghan's connection to Diana is emotional, symbolic, strategic, or some mixture of all three. The answer depends on whom you trust. And that is the problem. Trust has collapsed everywhere in this family. The palace does not trust the Sussexes. The Sussexes do not trust the palace. William does not trust Harry. Harry does not trust William. The public does not trust the press. And Charles Spencer, after Bashir, has every reason not to trust any media pitch that arrives wrapped in the language of tribute. That is the deeper story. It is not only about Meghan. It is not only about Harry. It is about the afterlife of Diana's pain. A pain so powerful that everyone still wants to stand near it. A pain so famous that even protecting it becomes controversial. So before taking a side, hold both truths. Harry lost his mother. William lost his mother. Charles Spencer lost his sister. Meghan married into a family haunted by a woman she never met. And Diana, who spent her life trying to be seen as a human being, is still being pulled between symbols. Saint, victim, rebel, mother, weapon, brand, ghost. Maybe the most respectful thing anyone can do is let Diana be more than what they need her to be. More than Harry's origin story. More than Meghan's comparison. More than William's private wound. More than Charles Spencer's guilt. More than Netflix's next possible global event. More than the monarchy's most painful mirror. Diana was a person. That should be the beginning and end of every decision made in her name. And if Charles Spencer is drawing a line now, that may be the reason. Not because he hates Meghan. Not because he wants to silence Harry. Not because he suddenly loves the royal machine. But because he knows what happens when Diana's vulnerability becomes someone else's production. He has seen that movie before. It ended badly. So the vault stays closed, the island remains quiet, the diaries remain private, the home movies remain unseen. And Diana, at least in that one protected corner of the world, is allowed to belong to herself. That is what Harry may not have seen coming. Not a palace attack, not a media backlash, not another royal briefing. But a family boundary. A brother saying, in effect, you may carry your grief. You may tell your story. You may remember your mother. But you do not get every piece of her. And maybe, after everything Diana gave the world, that is not cruelty. Maybe that is love. So the question is not simply whether Charles Spencer was right to draw the line. The question is whether anyone else had the courage to do it. Because Diana was exploited once through deception. Her brother seems determined that she will not be exploited again through nostalgia, grief, or a streaming contract. And in a family built on silence, that may be the loudest statement of all.